So you'll have your front that has 2 darts and your back.
Okay.
Place one on each on a separate piece of paper. So cut the original out that you just made and center front so that I've got the center front right on the edge, but I'll leave room for seam allowance. So there's one, and I'm going to label my center front right here because it's not going to have seam allowance on it. And then for my back, I'm going to measure in with my ruler parallel to the center back seam. So I have an extra 5/8 of an inch seam allowance there. I'm going to use a 1/4 everywhere else, but on the center back, we're going to have 5/8. And then I'm just going to lay my back skirt on there and leave room for seam allowance at the top. And trace around the darts that I have. Oh, this is our center back. I'm going to put my markings on it so I can tell the center front is going to be on the fold. My back. I'm going to extend straight over and label that as a 5/8 of an inch seam. Got these two pieces, right? Back and a front. So
Yes.
take the front and you're going to get better at making parallel lines, but you're going to draw from the end of each dart a line parallel to the center front all the way to the bottom, and then slide it over to the bottom of the next dart and make that one parallel too. All the way up the dart, but not through the point right there. We're going to treat this like we do the bust point. So you'll cut up from the bottom to the end of the dart, and you'll cut down from the top on one side, doesn't matter which side, to that dart point. And then when you've done that, you'll get your glue and close the dart, just like we do on the bodice. And then you'll close the other dart so that the lines end up right on top of each other. And you then have extra flare at the bottom. And you won't sew those as darts, but now the waist area will fit exactly as if there were darts there, because there's an additional amount of flare at the bottom, and it's just decorative at the bottom, and it hangs nice, and you don't sew the dart. Then to finish the outer edge side, we're going to measure over 1 inch and draw a straight line from the corner of the waistline. We've added 1 inch to the side. The maximum amount of flare before you have to slash and spread to add additional flare, but we'll finish that. So on both, and you're going to cut up to the end of the dart on both and close the top darts. So when you get that one finished, you're going to do the exact same thing to the back, And you'll draw a parallel line straight down from the center of both darts. And you'll add an inch to the side seam at the bottom, and you'll start from the top corner of the waist and I need to just make a video of this so that you can push pause whenever you want. And they'll both have an extra inch of flare on the sides. And when you're through with that, you can fill in behind the pieces. Where you want to join between the two at the bottom so that you can cut them off smooth. So this area that I've filled in and this area that I've filled in, you want to use your curve and just blend them so that they're connected. And the bottom of the skirt is nice and smooth. So I'm adding seam allowance at the top of 1/4 of an inch. And to make it easier for you to see what's happening, I cut mine off on where I want my new side seam to be. So this is the back. I've added seam allowance at the top. I've filled in those two areas. I added an inch out to the side, straight from the top corner down to where the end of my skirt is. And now when I look at it side this way and I use my ruler across the bottom, when I make a right angle right here at the bottom, it's kind of pointy. So what I'm doing is taking a straight line on my ruler and sliding it down. And I can tell I'm gonna have to change that, but I would rather do it side by side with my front. So I've got my front here. I haven't filled it in yet. I need to do that. But when I line these two up side by side right here, I want to make the bottom edge of this nice and smooth. So I would take my curve and just blend across the bottom when they're lined up. So I'm making the bottom of the curve nice. And that happens to be a right angle now. because anytime you've got a smooth curve, if you and here, where they come together. I'll finish filling this in and you can keep doing what you're. So when I get to the bottom of the front, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm just opening so that they look nice across the bottom. And I'll trim those off. This is where I'm at right now. It blends nicely across here. It blends nicely at the bottom. I've added an inch. But what is that when we started, these two skirts matched. So the originals, when you look at them side by side and you lay them on top of each other and you've got them lined up right here at the corner and the side seams are sitting on top of each other the way they're going to sew. So this side is aligned perfectly. If I draw a line down the center front onto the center back, parallel to the center back. So when you're standing up and you're wearing this skirt, if this is your body and you're wearing this skirt, it's going to hang from your widest points and your center back are going to be parallel to each other. So if this is the floor and this is your feet. So it's a bad drawing, but this is her behind and her widest part of her front. When she's standing on the floor, the tube of this skirt is perpendicular to the floor or parallel to the walls on both the center front and the center back. In order for this skirt to be hanging nicely, we have a tube shape and the center back and the center front are parallel to each other. And the side seam from here down is also parallel. And from here up, it's visually parallel, but it curves evenly on both the front and the back. Right here, where they're lining up, the center front and center back are parallel, and the side seam is parallel up to here. Does that make sense? So when we tube that hangs on the body just like that, and we pinch out a dart here and a dart here and a dart here, and that's what makes it sit firmly where it belongs. And you have this nice smooth tube shape hanging around the bottom, and these are all parallel to each other. And so gravity pulls on the fabric evenly and it hangs nice. And that's balance. When the grain and gravity work together and it hangs in a nice way. You don't want your skirt to kind of swing way out on one side or pull in. And now that when you know that when you're walking down the hall behind somebody, you're going to notice when their skirt is crooked. And it's because the pattern isn't balanced to their body. Oh. So these two started out balanced. When the side seams are sewn together, it's balanced on this person. Now that we've done this, we've changed our our look so that the skirt has flare in it now, and it kind of ruffles around the bottom, right? It's still the same amount of darting that we had before, and it's hanging smoothly and evenly because we just closed the darts. But we want to keep the side seam hanging straight. We don't want the side seam to push backward or push forward, because if it does that, what will happen here on the side is that it might look straight, but you'll get one side or the other that has more of a twirl of fabric on the side, and the others, it won't be even and balanced. So when you get it to this point, because we've added an inch to each side, the skirt balanced originally, but this plus this is bigger than this plus this. So when I lay this one down on top and I turn it over, my front and back, and I've got it lined up right now so that they're on top of each other. Make sure that that's true. So my side seams are on top of each other. And because the back had more darting than the front, I no longer have that balance on the side. I have a discrepancy of that much. Can you see that? And yours will be the same way, which means that if the center front and center back are hanging straight down, because that's what gravity is going to do to it, then my back is curling around the front by an extra inch or so. So in my picture, the back, there's more, the back comes down and there's more of it. So it's kind of spiraling here on the side. And it's not evenly flaring out. So in order to fix that, I have to balance the side seam. And there's 3 ways to look at that conveniently, but probably the easiest one, and I went ahead and cut the back, and I don't know that that was the easiest thing for you to see. But if you take the back skirt at the corner where it's supposed to line up, so right here on the corner of the side seam, you line up that corner of the side seam with the front, and you put a pin there. And I don't know if I have a pin either. Yes, I do. So I'm going to put a pin on that corner of the side seam, and then I'm going to come back over here to the center front. And I know you can't see through the paper, but I can. And right now they're lined up so that this is the center back and the center front is right here. So gravity is pulling them both in the same place on the center front, but the back is sitting like this with the front. So this is the, I'll just come up here to do it. This is the edge of my front, and this is the edge of my back. And in order to make those balance, I need to measure halfway between the two, divide it in half. And you do that by putting the pin in place so that you can find parallel on the center, front, and back. And then when you draw the line from the one onto the other, when you find half, and I need to switch to doing that in blue, then this becomes the new side seam for both pieces. This one I need to subtract this much from, that much, and from my front that was originally here, I need to add the same amount that I'm subtracting from the back, and then they both share the same side seam bell. I can kind of see your face. So do you want me to repeat any of that, or do you want to ask questions? So what you're watching me do right now is I've got it back aligned the way it was, and I'm looking through the paper. Do I need to move this so you can see? I'm looking through the paper and putting a little mark through to the back, so I know how much to cut off. So looking at it now, these would have lined up right here, but because the back has more flare than the front, and I flipped it over on top, I'm going to end up adding this much to the front, and whatever that amount is at the same level. So right here, it's 3/4 of an inch. So on this side, I'm going to mark this one at 3/4 of an inch, so I can cut off 3/4 of an inch here. But I've added 3/4 of an inch there, so I'll fold that out of the way so it's easier for you to see. But really all you have to do is see how different they are and divide that in half. So they now are back to their original total. But this one is bigger and this one is smaller. Now, if that didn't make sense, I can explain it 2 different ways, which either will just really hurt your head and give you a headache, or one of those 2 ways will make more sense than what this did. So I'm going to repeat this one. And it might have been easier if I had cut the front off. So our original, we've added an inch to the side and we've added an inch to the side. And this is where that came to on both pieces. This is how they line up the way that we made it. We closed the top darts up here and we opened them into flare at the bottom, and then we added an inch to each side. And now that might work easier. Wrap it around the other way so that the front is sitting on the back from the other direction. So this corner right here always has to stay right where it is. That has to stay. And then you'll just move this over until you've got 2 parallel lines right here. And if it helps, my lines appear to be somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch apart. Probably just a fat 1/4. And then when you get those 2 aligned, if you need to tape them together or pin them together, you can, but then hold them down and just mash over to the side and it will naturally wrap over and make the back smaller and the front wider. The last way for me to explain it, if I measure over, and this is a good way to double check it at the end when you're through. If I measure over from this corner, I got that on the screen. If I measure from this corner right here to the center back, that is, when I line it up with the grain, with the center back, that is 3 1/4 inches. So if I draw that line, 3 1/4, so if I measure over 3 1/4 from this line again, when it comes down here, so I'm making a line parallel from the side seam of the skirt that's parallel to the center back. So this line, starting here at the corner, is parallel to the center back. If I do the same thing on the front, that line width is 3 5/8. So I'm starting here at the corner again, 3 5/8. I'll measure over 3 5/8 right here and draw that parallel line. Everything else is flare. When on the original skirt on this corner, I get 5 inches. And when I measure over to the corner on this one, I get 6 1/2. So if I have 6 1/2 on this side and 5 on this side, if I add those both together and I have 5, 6 1/2 plus 5, that gives me 11 1/2 inches divided by 2. That's a quarter. 11 divided by 2 is 5 1/2. So 5 means that each of them should be 5 3/4. So 6 1/2 minus 5.75 is 3/4 of an inch. And that moves us over here to this same line where I got the fold and where I split the difference. And they all came out the same thing. But if folding it, you know, you line it up right here, roll it over, hold on to the corner. You're always holding on to that top corner of the side seam of the skirt, and make this parallel and fold that down. That's my favorite way of figuring it out. It's the most straightforward. And it comes out, you're going to come over, and the distance out here on the back needs to be this distance is not right here, but this one has to be. So on the front, when you do the same thing on the front, this distance is equal and this one is not. Just gave you a headache and I'm sorry. So lay them down side by side so that the center front and center back are not touching each other. You want your side seams touching each other because they're the ones that sew together. And it's going to be easier for you if you cut the side seams off and then tape them together side by side. When it's right here, they're together, it's parallel here, and then you can see how I added to one side and subtracted from the other.